Are you interested in learning how to create a dashboard in Excel that looks like this one? If the answer is yes, then this video is for you, because I'm going to be showing you step by step how to create this dashboard from scratch. This dashboard is dynamic and interactive, as you can see, and everything has been developed off pivot tables and slicers. There is no any single formula involved. If you'd like to grab the file or the workbook that I'm going to be using in this video tutorial so that you can follow along, check the link in the description of this video or in the pinned comments below. So without further ado, let us get started. The dataset that we are going to use to build this dashboard is right here, and we have the date column, we have the year column, the month column, the region, the sales rep names, the brand, the customer industry, the sales channel, as well as the sales value or the sales amount. So this is basically transactions data. The first thing that you'll do is to copy or duplicate this data set right here. So I'll go ahead and highlight all the data set, Control C on the keyboard. I'm going to create a fresh new Excel workbook so that we can start building this dashboard from scratch. So I'll paste the data in here. Let me just resize all these columns at once. Now I can rename this worksheet into data. I'll go ahead and create another worksheet that I will rename dashboard. Let me move it to the left right there. Select all the cells, right mouse click on top of any of the columns and make sure that the column width is at 8, and also right click anywhere in any of the rows and the row 8, make it 15 all the way through. Click OK. Let me actually save this file before I start working on the dashboard layout on the desktop. Let me call it dashboard design. I save this file right there. Now the first thing that I need to do is to create the header of my dashboard, this one right here, the top. So I'll come back to this workbook and select 3 rows on the top. I'll move all the way through up to column S. I can just change the background of this one to this color right here, in a gray color. Let me go with this. One more thing that I need to do, I'll actually remove the grid lines. Let's now finalize working on our top area and create this heading right here and add all these visuals in there. I need to insert the heading, so I'll come over to the insert tab. Under the text, I'll insert a word art. I can pick any from here. I'll call this one Open Training Camp Sales Dashboard. I can reduce on the size of the text, something like that. Let me make it bold. I can now move it on the top right here. Okay, let's now insert our icon. So I'll come over to the insert tab. Under the illustrations, I click on icons. So the first icon, I'll pick it from graphs. You can pick any of these icons. I'll go with something like this. The second icon, I'll actually pick it from the commerce group. So I'll type in here commerce. It will give me a variety of icons that I can pick from. I'm interested in this one right here. So I click on it. I now have 2 icons to insert. Let me insert the last one, and that is the tally. This icon right here. Now I have all the 3. I can just insert them at once by clicking right here. I can reduce the height and the width to something like 1.6 right there. Now I can pick one individual icon and place it in the appropriate position. Try to make sure it's purely aligned. I can bring this one right up here, and I can also bring this one in there. One more thing that I need to do on the header right here, I need to insert my logo. So I'll come back to illustrations, under pictures. I pick from this computer. So I'll pick my logo, which is this one right here. Let me do some cropping so that I can resize it. I can reduce on the size, holding Shift key on the keyboard. I can move until I get my desired size, and then I can carry it and place it right there on the top. I can extend this one right here. The top section of our dashboard is starting to take shape. Now, what I need to do is to come over to the data sheet and convert this data set into an official Excel table so that I can start working on calculations and values that I'll be bringing onto the dashboard. So to do that, I'll actually highlight the entire data set holding Control Shift, right pointing arrow. I select all the column headers, still holding Control Shift, down pointing arrow. I select the entire data set. Now I can come over to the Insert Ribbon tab and insert a table. The shortcut key is Control T. Or if I don't do that, I can come back to the Home Ribbon tab and format as a table. So you can pick any table style of your choice. I'll go ahead and pick any from here, like this one right there. The Create Table dialog box will open, and only what you need to do here is to confirm that your data set has headers, which it has. So I'll go ahead and say OK. I'll give this table a name. I call it sales data. If you are not impressed with the table style, you can click anywhere in the data, come back to the table design option. Under the table styles, you can click on this drop down and clear the style so that you go back to your normal view, but you maintain the table structure. Let's now create our first pivot table from this data set. So I click anywhere in the data. On the Insert Ribbon tab, I click on this option, Insert Pivot Table. It will ask me, do you want to insert the pivot table on this particular worksheet, or you can create a new worksheet. I'm interested in creating a new worksheet because I want to place all pivot tables on one single worksheet. So I rename this worksheet into something like this, pivots. So the first calculation that I need to make is for these values that you're seeing on top, total sales and total transactions. So I'll come back to my workbook and I start to build that pivot table. Let me drag my sales value into our values field. There you go. I get the total sales in here. I can right click on this value, format this as a number and use 1000 separator, and I can change the column headers to total sales. Let me actually move this worksheet on the right. Now how do I bring this value onto our dashboard right here? So one thing that I do, I'll insert a text box right here. So what we need to do is to link our text box to any cell that has a value in it so that it can display it over here. But the limitation is that you cannot point it to a pivot table. But remember, our value is sitting inside a pivot table. So what we need to do is to actually create a named range outside this pivot table. So I'll come right here and say equals A4, because that's where the value is sitting. So when I hit enter key on the keyboard, this value will replicate in this cell. So what I can do, I can create a named range for this one, which I'll call total sales. So that's the named range. I can also format this one as a currency. I can also change this format of the pivot as a currency. There you go. Now it's time to bring our value onto the dashboard. So I'll come back onto our text box. While selected, I come to the formula bar. I say equals. I now type in my named range, which I created, total sales. When I hit enter key, I'll get the value in here. So what I need to do is to format this shape. I don't want the fill color, and I also don't want the shape outline. I can also increase on the font size, make it bold. Now I can duplicate this one for our count of transactions. I will insert another small text box so that I can give a header to my values. So I'll call this one total sales. Increase on the font. Shape format, I don't need the shape fill. I also don't need the shape outline. So I'll carry it on top right here. Let me duplicate this one and move it right here. And I will call this one total transactions. Let's come back to our pivots and copy this pivot table, paste it right here. Now what we need to do is to change this one into account, remove the formatting and leave it as a number, and I can call this one transactions. I'll also create a reference out of this pivot table. I'll say equals E4 because I want reference to this value. Create a named range for this value. I'll call it total transactions. Now to bring it into our dashboard, I'll just point there and change this name to total transactions. Hit enter key on the keyboard. I can increase on the font size, make it bold and centered. And there you go. Now our top part is finished. Let us now start creating our charts. The first chart that we'd like to create is this one right here, which shows the performance of each single sales rep, and the values that we'd like to display is the sales amount as well as the transactions that they achieved. So I'll move back to the workbook. On our pivots, I'll just copy this pivot table, paste it right here. Let's right mouse click on the pivot and show field list so that we can start building our pivot table. So I'll drag the sales rep column into the rows, and I'll also drag the sales value onto the values. And there you go. Our pivot table is starting to take shape. So I click in the pivot table, right mouse click and format these values. I'll format this one as a number, use 1000 separator. Let's rename our column headers. I'll call this one sales rep, and this one will be the sales amount as well as the transactions. I click in the pivot table, I come back to the design tab, and I don't need the grand totals, so I'll turn them off. Now we need to insert our pivot chart, so I click anywhere in the pivot table. On the insert ribbon tab, I click on the pivot chart option. I click in the drop down, pivot chart. I can't actually go with the column, but let us try this combo right here. And right here on our series name, let's make the transactions into a line chart. So I'll place a check mark right here. And there you go. Our chart will be inserted. Now, what we need to do is to format this chart so that it can look exactly like this one right here. So I'll come back to the workbook. I'll turn off the field buttons. I also right mouse click on my legend and I click on format legend. Let me show it on the bottom right there. Okay, I also get rid of the grid lines inside my chart area, so I select all of them and delete key on the keyboard. Right mouse click on these bars right here, navigate over to format data series. Let's increase the gap width to something like 50%. I will turn on the chart title and call this one sales rep performance. I click on this line right here, right mouse click, format data series, click on the fill and line options. Let's activate our markers. So I'll come over to the mark options, built in, and I want to choose this round marker right here. Let's make it 6, and maybe we could also increase on the line width to something like this. Now let's actually right mouse click on these bars, go back to format data series. Under the fill and line, let us choose a solid border line. Let's leave it to orange and increase on the width to something like that. We could also change the fill color. Let's use something like blue, but increase on the transparency. Our chart is starting to take shape. I can actually increase on the size. We can also increase on the sales rep names to something like 12. And also right mouse click on this axis and then choose format axis. Under the fill and line option, let us actually add a solid line and we can give it a purple color. Increase on the width to something like 2.5. We are not interested in these vertical axis values, so I'm going to right mouse click, format axis. Under the fill and line, we don't need any fill, and for the line we don't need any line. Text options, text fill, no fill, and the text outline, no outline. So I close off this one, it will be hidden. Do the same for this one right here, format axis. Under the fill and line, we don't need any fill, we don't need any line, and for the text, no text fill, no text outline. Now we can activate our data labels. Right mouse click, add data labels. Right mouse click on the data labels, format data labels. Under the alignment, we shall change the text direction to something like this. Let's go back to the label options. We shall bring it inside end. Let's increase on the font to something like 13. font color, we shall give it white and make it bold. Now also click on our line, right mouse click, add data labels, right mouse click on the data labels, format data labels. Under the label options, let us actually bring them above. Increase on the font size to something like 13 so that we are consistent. Make it bold. So our chart is starting to take shape. What remains is to give it a little bit of background. So I select the entire chart. Under the format, let's choose the shape fill to something that is gray, something like this. I also increase on the font of our legend to something like 12. Now I can copy Ctrl X or cut this chart onto our dashboard. So I can Ctrl V and paste it right here. There you go. That's our first chart. The second chart, we are going to create this one right here, which shows us the sales by country. So I'll come back to my workbook under the pivots. Let's copy this pivot right here and paste it right there. Right click anywhere in the pivot and show field list so that we can build this pivot table. So what I will do, I remove these transactions from here, and instead of the sales rep, I'll actually get it out, and I will now put in the region. So this column header right here will become country, and there you go. Now let's insert our pivot chart. I'll come over to the insert pivot chart. I'll go with the bar chart, the first option. I click OK. There you go. Now let us format this bar chart to look exactly like this one right here. So the first thing that we need to do is to remove the chart elements that we are not interested in. So I'll click in the chart. Under the pivot chart analyze, I'll turn off the field buttons. Let me also turn off this total. So I select and delete key on the keyboard. I'll go ahead and remove all the grid lines. So all of them selected, delete key on the keyboard. Let's give our chart a title, sales by country. I also get rid of this horizontal axis because I'm going to activate data labels. Right mouse click on the bars, format data series. Let's also decrease on the gap width to something like 60. I can also reduce on the chart size and pull it a little bit down. Let's increase on the font size for these country names. Right mouse click on this axis and format axis. Under the fill and line options, we are going to be adding a solid line. Let me check which color it is. On the original chart, it's a purple one. So we choose the color purple. Increase on the width to something like that. Let's also change the color for our bars. So I'll come over to the fill option. We'll give it a solid fill. Let's check which color it is on the original chart. So we shall pick the color, which is this one right here. Increase on the transparency. We can also add a borderline, a solid one, and increase on the width as well. Now we can activate our data labels. Right mouse click on the data labels, format data label options. Let us bring these ones inside end, and for the font we shall increase to something like this and make it bold. So we select all our data labels, and for the font color we give this one blue. Now what remains is to give this chart area some kind of background. So I'll come over to the format. So the shape fill right here, we shall pick any color of our choice. Let us go with something like this. Now one more thing before we copy this chart onto our dashboard, I'll go ahead and sort these values from smallest to largest. There you go. Now let's cut Ctrl X and paste this chart right on our dashboard. So I'll move it a little bit up right here, and let's also increase on the chart size. Let's now create our last two charts. So I'll head back to the original dashboard. So we're going to be creating these two charts right here, sales by brand and also sales by industry. So let's go back to our new dashboard. on the pivots worksheet. So I'll copy this pivot table right here, paste it somewhere right there. Now we can right click in any of these values and turn on or show field list so that we can start building this pivot table. Instead of showing values by region, I'll go ahead and remove this one. Now let's bring in our brand. Now let us click anywhere in this new pivot table, go back to our insert ribbon tab, and let's insert a new pivot chart. Control X, copy my chart onto my dashboard. Control V for pasting. So I'll bring this one right here. Let me also add on the size for this one. Let's work on this chart here, sales by industry. I'll come back to the pivots, copy this pivot table, Control C. I'll paste it somewhere here. Click anywhere in this pivot table, come back to the insert ribbon tab, insert a pivot chart. And for the background color, let us actually give this one something orange. Control X to cut this chart onto our dashboard. So I'll paste it right here. Let us increase on the size. So the last thing that we need to do on this dashboard is to bring in our slicers right here that we shall be using to filter this entire dashboard. So I'll come back to the pivots worksheet, click anywhere in any of the pivot tables. Under the insert ribbon tab, I'll insert a slicer from here, and we are going to be slicing our chart based on the year, month, and region. So these are 3 slicers. I click OK. They all get inserted automatically. Before we actually copy these slicers onto our dashboard, let us first test if they are working. So I click in this option right here. You can see it's only filtering values from this pivot table right here. So the chart that is connected to this pivot table is also automatically updating. So we need to connect all these slicers so that they can filter all these pivot tables at once. So you right mouse click on the slicer and choose this option, report connections. I'll expand this so that we can see all the pivots. So I'll connect this slicer to all of these pivot tables. Click OK. Right mouse click on this one, report connection. Connect it to all of the pivot tables that are connecting to our charts. Click OK. Right mouse click on this last slicer right here, connect it to all our pivot tables. Click OK. Now that we have established the connection, let us test our slicers. So I'll come and pick this value right here. You can see all the pivots get updated. I'll actually go ahead and pick any month from here. You see the values will change. So if they change from the pivot, they will also be changing on our chart. So let me actually copy these slicers and paste them onto our dashboard. So I'll hold Control and click on all these slicers, Control X, come over to my dashboard worksheet and Control V. Let us also format these slicers so that they can fit on our chart. So I'll come over to the slicer options. For the column, I will make this one into 1 column and resize it. This one, I'll give it 3 columns, and I can also resize it to fit on the space that is left right here. Let's also work on our last slicer. So I'll give this one how many columns. Let me also resize and see how many columns we can get. So let's give it 3 columns. We have actually finished designing our dashboard. So I'll go ahead and test if things are working properly. I'll filter for 2014, and there you go. You can see all the values are updating on our charts. Let me actually pick this particular month right here, and there you go. You can see all the charts are updating.